Operation Gladio, the name itself, evokes a sense of mystery and intrigue. It conjures images of clandestine meetings, shadowy figures, and covert operations. Operation Gladio was a real secret army operating within the heart of Europe for decades. Established by NATO and the CIA during the Cold War, their mission was to resist a potential Soviet invasion of Western Europe. Gladio's existence remained shrouded in secrecy for years. It wasn't until the fall of the Berlin Wall that the truth began to emerge. Instead of simply preparing for a foreign invasion, Gladio became embroiled in domestic politics, implicated in a series of terrorist attacks aimed at destabilizing left-wing movements across Europe. The story of Operation Gladio is a tangled web of Cold War paranoia, political manipulation, and outright violence. The seeds of Gladio were sown in the aftermath of World War II. With the Soviet Union looming large over Eastern Europe, the United States and its allies were determined to prevent the spread of communism. NATO was formed as a bulwark against Soviet aggression, and a network of secret stay-behind armies was established across Western Europe. These units, known as Gladio in Italy, were to be activated in the event of a Soviet invasion or a communist takeover. However, as the Cold War dragged on, Gladio's mission began to morph. The perceived threat of a Soviet invasion waned, but the fear of communist influence within Western European governments remained. Gladio units, originally intended for use against a foreign enemy, were increasingly seen as a tool to combat domestic political opponents. The genesis of Operation Gladio can be traced back to the early years of the Cold War. The year was 1947. The Iron Curtain was descending across Europe, dividing the continent between East and West. In Washington, the newly formed CIA and its wartime predecessor, the OSS, were already laying the groundwork for what would become a global network of covert operations. The Marshall Plan, launched in 1948, included provisions for covert funding to support anti-communist groups and initiatives. Italy, with its large Communist Party and strategic location, became a focal point of these early Cold War machinations. In the pivotal 1948 elections, the CIA secretly funneled funds to the Christian Democrats to prevent the PCI from coming to power. Secretly, the groundwork was being laid for a more clandestine approach to countering the communist threat, the creation of stay-behind networks like Gladio. These networks would operate outside the normal military chain of command, ready to wage a shadow war against a potential Soviet invasion or internal subversion. As the Cold War intensified in the early 1950s, NATO adopted stay-behind networks. These units would become a thorn in the side of occupying forces. NATO established the Clandestine Planning Committee and the Allied Clandestine Committee. The CIA played a key role in supporting these networks. Focus shifted to combating internal subversion and maintaining political stability. Italy, with its large Communist Party and history of political instability, became a prime location for a robust stay-behind network. In 1956, under CFAR, Operation Gladio was established. General Giovanni De Lorenzo led this secret army. Gladio's purpose was to resist a potential Soviet invasion. The existence of Gladio was a closely guarded secret. As the 1960s dawned, a palpable change swept across Western Europe. The stark fear of a full-scale Soviet invasion began to recede. The construction of the Berlin Wall in 1961, while a stark symbol of the Cold War divide, also paradoxically served as a reassurance to the West. However, this easing of tensions on one front did not translate into a period of tranquility. Instead, a new threat emerged: the growing influence of leftist movements within Western European societies. In Italy, the Communist Party, PCI, continued to gain popularity, alarming the ruling Christian Democrats and their allies in Washington. Faced with this perceived internal threat, the original purpose of Gladio to resist a foreign invasion began to be reinterpreted. The organization, with its clandestine structure, access to weapons, and network of trained operatives, was seen as a potential tool to combat this new enemy within. The year 1969 marked a turning point in Italy's post-war history. On December 12th, a bomb exploded in the crowded lobby of the National Agrarian Bank in Piazza Fontana, Milan. The blast killed 17 people and injured 88 others. The bombing sent shockwaves across Italy and beyond, marking the beginning of a period of political violence and instability known as the Years of Lead. The authorities initially blamed anarchist groups, arresting several suspects and portraying the bombing as an isolated incident. However, evidence began to surface linking the bombing to right-wing extremists, particularly a neo-fascist group called Ordine Nuovo. Further investigation revealed that some of the individuals involved in the bombing had connections to Gladio operatives. While concrete proof of direct Gladio involvement remained elusive, the bombing fit a pattern of clandestine operations aimed at destabilizing the country and discrediting leftist movements. The Piazza Fontana bombing was not an isolated incident. It was part of a broader strategy by right-wing forces, with alleged support from elements within the Italian state and intelligence services. This strategy of tension aimed to create fear and instability, justifying authoritarian measures. Acts of violence were blamed on leftist groups to undermine public trust in democratic institutions. The Piazza Fontana bombing created a wave of revulsion against leftist groups. The 1970s began with a chilling reminder of the fragility of Italian democracy. On December 7, 1970, Prince Giunio Valerio Borghese launched a coup d'etat. Known as the Golpe Borghese, it aimed to install a far-right government and suppress leftist movements. The coup failed due to poor planning and hesitation among conspirators. Its implications revealed disturbing connections to Operation Gladio. As the 1970s progressed, the strategy of tension gripped Italy. Bombings and violence became tragically commonplace, often targeting civilians. Many attacks were false flags by right-wing extremists linked to Gladio. The Pettiano bombing on May 31, 1972 was a key example. 3 Carabinieri officers were killed by a booby-trapped car. Initially blamed on the Red Brigades, the truth was more sinister. Vincenzo Vinciguerra, a neo-fascist, admitted to the bombing with alleged military support. The bombing exposed Gladio's role in manipulating events within Italy. On May 28, 1974, the Piazza della Loggia bombing in Brescia marked a horrifying crescendo of the strategy of tension. The attack during an anti-fascist demonstration killed 8 and injured over 100. Like the Piazza Fontana bombing, it deepened the climate of fear and mistrust in Italy. Initially blamed on leftist groups, particularly the Red Brigades, this fit the narrative constructed by right-wing extremists and their state allies. The government launched a crackdown on left-wing organizations, arresting hundreds. But the official narrative crumbled under the weight of evidence. Investigations revealed right-wing extremists linked to Ordine Nuovo and possibly Gladio. Despite evidence, trials were marred by inconsistencies and lack of political will. The bombing symbolized the strategy of tension, a chilling reminder of the lengths powerful forces would go to manipulate public opinion and suppress dissent. The assassination of Aldo Moro in 1978 stands as one of the most tragic and controversial events in Italian history. Moro, a prominent Christian Democrat politician, was kidnapped by the Red Brigades on March 16, 1978. The Red Brigades demanded the release of imprisoned comrades in exchange for Moro's life. The Italian government, led by Prime Minister Giulio Andreotti, faced an agonizing dilemma. Negotiations with terrorists were seen as a surrender to violence. Tragically, on May 9, 1978, Moro's body was found in the trunk of a car in Rome. The Red Brigades claimed responsibility, but the circumstances remained shrouded in controversy. While Italy's years of lead and the revelations of Gladio's activities there sent shockwaves through Europe, it became clear that stay-behind armies and their involvement in domestic affairs were not limited to Italy. Across Western Europe, similar clandestine networks had been established during the Cold War. These networks, like their Italian counterpart, strayed from their mission of resisting a Soviet invasion, becoming embroiled in the political turmoil of the 70s and 80s. The existence of these networks remained hidden until the 90s, when revelations forced European governments to confront their Cold War legacies. These revelations exposed the dark side of the Cold War, showing that clandestine operations extended far beyond the Iron Curtain. Belgium, Germany, France and others acknowledged their own stay-behind networks, often with heavily redacted documents. The full extent of these networks' activities and their connections to political violence remain subjects of debate. Section 2: Terror in the Supermarkets, the Brabant Massacres. Between 1982 and 1985, a wave of terror swept through Belgium, leaving a trail of blood and unanswered questions. A series of seemingly random attacks targeting supermarkets and shopping centres left 28 people dead and scores injured. The brutality and seemingly senseless nature of the attacks shocked and terrified the Belgian public. The attackers, known for their military-style tactics, were never apprehended, and their identities and motives remain a subject of intense speculation. The attacks were characterized by a chilling level of violence. The perpetrators, often arriving in stolen cars and armed with automatic weapons, would storm their targets, firing indiscriminately. The Belgian authorities struggled to make sense of the carnage, and the case remained unsolved, fueling a climate of fear and suspicion. On September 26, 1980, a bomb ripped through the crowded entrance to the Oktoberfest festival grounds, killing 13 people and injuring over 200. The attack, the deadliest in Germany since the Second World War, shattered the festive atmosphere and exposed the vulnerability of joyous occasions to terrorism. The investigation focused on Gundolf Kohler, a 21-year-old with far-right sympathies. Kohler, who died in the blast, had bomb-making materials and admired Hitler. Authorities concluded Kohler acted alone, driven by personal frustrations and extremist beliefs. However, questions linger about the official narrative and whether Kohler was part of a larger network of right-wing extremists. Some suggest Kohler had ties to neo-Nazi groups and may have received support for his attack. While evidence linking Kohler to stay-behind networks remains elusive, the possibility fuels conspiracy theories and casts a shadow over Germany's past. The year 1990 marked a turning point in the history of Operation Gladio. The Berlin Wall had fallen, and the Cold War was drawing to a close. In Italy, a dark secret was about to be exposed, sending shockwaves through the international community. On July 24, 1990, Giulio Andreotti stood before the Italian Parliament. He revealed the existence of Operation Gladio, a clandestine NATO-backed network. Andreotti's confession sent shockwaves through Italy and beyond. He confirmed Italy had maintained a secret army operating outside the normal military chain of command. He insisted Gladio had never been involved in any illegal activities or domestic terrorism. Andreotti's revelations were only the tip of the iceberg. His confession opened a Pandora's box of questions and suspicions beyond Italy's borders. Across Europe, governments had to confront their own Cold War secrets. In Belgium, a parliamentary inquiry revealed a clandestine network, SDRA-8, supported by NATO and the CIA. The inquiry failed to link SDRA-8 to the Brabant massacres due to lack of cooperation. In France, the government admitted to a Gladio-like organization, Clandestine, disbanded in the early 60s. Suspicions remained about continued clandestine activities. In Germany, the government acknowledged a stay-behind network, but claimed it was purely defensive. Links between former Nazis and the network raised troubling questions. Operation Gladio's revelations sent shockwaves through Europe. Governments caught in lies had to confront a past they'd rather forget. Investigations raised more questions than answers. In Italy, a commission found military and extremists used Gladio to manipulate politics. The 1995 report depicted a state within a state operating with impunity. The report was notable for what it did not reveal. Key witnesses refused to testify, citing national security or safety concerns. Crucial documents were destroyed or disappeared. Gladio's full extent and authorization remained shrouded in secrecy. The legacy of Operation Gladio is complex and troubling. It stands as a chilling reminder of the Cold War's dark underbelly. Clandestine operations, political manipulation and state-sponsored terrorism. A testament to the dangers of unchecked power and how noble intentions can be twisted. Gladio also serves as a cautionary tale about the limits of knowledge and the elusiveness of truth. Despite decades of investigations, the full story of Gladio remains elusive. The lack of definitive answers has fueled a cottage industry of conspiracy theories. Gladio has been blamed for everything from neo-fascism to JFK's assassination. The truth likely lies between official narratives and wilder conspiracy theories.